it going? Welcome to the stream. As you can see, we have a couple of quite exciting new landscape additions this week. Observe the lighting and observe the ring light, which I'm looking into like a moth being drawn inexorably towards its doom. Moving swiftly on from that, I'm going to walk you through a couple of things and then we'll get straight to it. First off, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I know we have people here from a bunch of different fandoms and groups. We've got some Escape Artists folks, some Magnus Archives folks, some friends from various parts of the planet. Thank you so much for joining us. This is a ton of fun, and it's really down to you that it is as much fun as it is. Next up, big thanks and big kudos to our two fan artists this week, Fluffy Taco and Pezzy, who you can find on Twitter at Fluffy Taco, spelled with a K, and Pink Pezzilla, P-E-Z...
I'll put links in the chat.
I-L-L-A. Marguerite will put links in the chat shortly. Some of you may be new, and for those of you who are, you're probably going to want to know what's about to happen. Don't worry, we've got you. First off, there's going to be an opening monologue. The chances of me making it through that this week with a straight face are in single figures. Prepare accordingly. Then we'll check in with what's new with Alistair this week, and from there we'll go to a recap of the story we've been doing for the last few weeks and content warnings. And as is always the case with Search and Rescue, there are content warnings. And then we will go on to the story itself, and then to shenanigans. But without further ado, I need to ask you a question. Have you ever played Tarmageddon? You have probably not played Tarmageddon. I mean, I can promise you up front it does exist. It was a VR game from 2017 where you played as Wayne Discipline, a CIA agent embedded with Afghan guerrillas during the proxy war with the Soviets in the 80s. As a Russian force advances on the pass he stationed in, see, I told you, under a minute, Wayne curses the poor equipment available to his unit, proclaiming, "Damn it, I wish we had more army guns," out loud. Unfortunately, his plea is heard by a well-meaning but somewhat difficult, somewhat unfamiliar with English haunted rug, which grants what it thought was Wayne's request for more ptarmigans. Immediately, a vast swarm of the Arctic birds descend on the pass, obliterating the Russian troops, before wheeling around towards Wayne's position. This is the start of the game. The rest entirely comprises shooting ptarmigans from a machine gun turret in VR before they overwhelm you. The birds poo constantly, obscuring Wayne's vision unless he stops to wipe his visor. But he has to choose his moments carefully. If he stops the hurricane of lead for more than a few seconds, the line will be overrun by thousands of shrieking, shitting wildfowl. It does sound, admittedly, like a game that shouldn't exist, and despite having assured you it's real, I must now complicate things and admit that it technically isn't. Just think of it like a sort of Schrodinger's game, perhaps. Tarmageddon, you see, was originally one of the 1,000 fictional video games I tweeted in 2016-17, and then one of the 100 that I selected for the 100 best video games that never existed, the book based on said tweets. So far, so not real. But then, Rebellion Developments, whose publishing arm produced the book, and whose concept artists illustrated it, decided to base their annual staff game jam on my list of fictional games, thus making several of them into paradoxes. Around 20 games crossed the Rubicon into reality, including space station cat-sitting game Look Are You Coming In or Not, and chilling arcade classic Cabbage. But Tarmageddon was technically the most accomplished. Headed by one of the producers behind Zombie Army 4 Dead War, the team behind Tarmageddon put together this fully working VR game in 3 days, repurposing parrots from, I think, Strange Brigade to make the ptarmigans. I seem to recall providing the voice acting for the haunted rug. It was great fun. That is a piece by a friend of ours called Nate Crowley. Nate is quite unlike any other human I've ever encountered. He is magnificent. He really...
What's his Twitter handle? I can't find it.
Frog Croakley.
Thank you.
L-E-Y. Nate genuinely tweeted over 1,000 made-up video games, just in a never-ending stream. And many of them are deeply and profoundly hilarious. Marguerite is in fact getting our copy of the book, which he not only autographed but doodled in for us, because what...
Oh. This is... Oh my gosh. I have to figure out the camera thingy. This is the book. It is fabulous. It has one of my all-time favorite not real video games.
Sally Longnose.
Sally Longnose. Oh, she's an elephant. She's a legal elephant. She's a legal elephant in a random procedural generated game.
Yes.
Sorry, that's what he's saying at me, so.
It is so good. I cannot recommend it highly enough. There will be links in the Twitter
Chat
thread
shortly.
and in the chat shortly. It is just the absolute best. Anyway, hi, how is everyone? Let's talk about what's new with me. This is always a really weird month for me because this is a month where all of kind of genre fiction is focused on the Hugos and on Worldcon, and that means that you're either going, oh, I wish I was going, or you're going, oh, but I don't feel like anyone's given me a cookie. And guess which one of those I did? The annoying one. So, there's been a lot. I'm processing a lot at the moment. I'm processing a lot of stuff about what happened last year. There was that whole thing with a party that we were allowed to go to, but we also weren't allowed to go to. And with a lot of the outsider complex, which I struggle with an awful lot professionally anyway. And the thing which is I've really circled around to in the last couple of days is the realization, thanks largely to my esteemed wingwoman and partner in all things, that I'm valid as hell. No one is going to come and pat me on the head and go, yes, Alistair, you are a wizard now. I've been a wizard for as long as I've been able to do joined up writing, and probably a bit before that. I was that good. And basically, I just got to find joy in my work, and I'm in the process of finding joy in the work again. And, thanks to Marguerite and thanks to excellent friends of ours who've, like Alex Axe, who is a superb author, and Chloe Yates, who is a superb author and editor, I'm actually getting a sense of confidence again, a bit, kind of. And it's going all right. Also, this week I am putting together the newsletter, which is obviously the thing I always do because it's a week, and also the newsletter special, which is a spotlight on all the finalists for the Best Hugo Fan Writer, including me, which is one of the reasons why I've been a bit like, this week, because it's difficult to write 400 words about how awesome you are, so I'm paying someone else to do it.
Which is why.
Which is great. It was very Tim Curry, wasn't it? I'm going to the one place not ruined by capitalism. Space!
Oh, okay. Don't mind us.
And we're back in the room.
There's going to be a poll today. I'm frantically building it in the other room.
There actually is a poll.
We're going to have a poll.
So, that reminds me of the other stuff I don't know why I'm doing this. The other stuff which is new with us today. This is going to be the last part of... we are kind of talking about writing speeches. This is going to be the last part of Search and Rescue. And it's a really interesting bit. It's actually 5 miniature flash pieces. So, obviously, we have a gap. And that's where you folks come in. So, if there is something that you wanted to hear us read, then let us know. And we're going to have a poll with some options on it.
I hope.
And we hope. And there'll be democracy. Democracy's good, right?
Well, it's solely lacking in many places right now, so yes, let us increase the level of ambient democracy.
Yes, the level of ambient democracy will increase from 1 shortly. And I think that brings us to the recap and to content warnings. For the last few weeks...
No, you...
What have I missed? What did I miss? We have
Move your keyboard.
You folks would worry if he wasn't here.
Right. So you better give a little update on the boy here.
So. Say hi.
Everybody say hi to Chungus.
He said hi. So, the Chungus...
Chungus needs to be the next emoji. I have decided.
So, the Chungus is doing very, very, very well. He's currently living in the fridge.
He's in hibernation mode because we're not using him often enough.
And basically, what we've been talking about switching the feeding times around a little bit, haven't we? So yes. We can use his offcuts and make delicious bread from his flesh. That went really dark, really fast. I'm very sorry. I'm not. But yeah, Chungus is doing ridiculously well. It is all good in the land of the Chungus. Shall we recap?
Exactly. Scott's right. Chungus is in cryo.
Chungus is in cryo.
He's undergoing life extending therapies. You know,
spending a couple of days a week dead for tax reasons. You know it. So, previously on Storytime, for the last few weeks we've been doing a story called Search and Rescue by Kerry Hammond. And it's all witness testimony, often first person, from a search and rescue officer in a carefully unnamed American national park. And as the story goes on, three things become apparent. Nothing is going well in this park. There are predatory pockets of time and space, which things emerge from. Pockets which seem to be defined by stairs, just appearing in the middle of nowhere. Stairs which have been there for so long that the search and rescue officers, when they are trained, are ordered to never talk about them or go up them. And it doesn't take. And as the story finished, there was a very clear implication that whatever is happening out in the wilds is beginning to accelerate. Now, Kerry Hammond actually sold this story to Channel Zero, which was the 4-season-long, actually rather good, Sci-Fi Channel creepypasta anthology show. The only problem is that the season based on Search and Rescue, which is season 3, called Butcher's Block, is incredibly loosely based on Search and Rescue. They went in a very, very different direction, and Kerry, because she sold the rights, had to let it go. Which makes what we're doing today kind of interesting, because there are 5 flash pieces which hit after Search and Rescue finished.
You need to define what flash is.
Flash fiction is fiction up to 1,000 words long, unless you're me, in which case it's fiction up to 1,500 words long, with the first 0 very hurriedly drawn in place over the 5 with a Sharpie, because that counts.
They're under 2,000-ish word stories.
There we are. So basically, Greg Van Eekhout, who's a really, really good author, whose book Cog is the best middle grade cyberpunk Blade Runner-esque anti-capitalist adventure with a robotic dog I've ever read. Brilliantly described flash fiction stories as story grenades. You throw them in a room, they go bang, they tell a story, and they're done. It's basically that. So we have 5 of those, which orbit Search and Rescue in a really, really interesting way.
And they're all by Kerry.
And they are all by Kerry. Now, there are, of course, content warnings. Those of you who've been with us the last few weeks will know that these things get dark. And this one is these 5 stories are absolutely no exception. In particular, content warnings this week for claustrophobia, implied child threats, violence and death, and body horror. So, say what?
Don't forget water, meds, yada yada.
I was getting to that.
Oh, sorry.
It's all good.
The flow. Please excuse me.
So, not at all. So, before we get started, 3 things. If you don't have any, get some water or a drink. If you have meds you need to take, please take them. If you need to eat a food, eat a food. I'm seeing someone's cat boys are not fed in the chat. Please attend to your cat and dog, boys and girls, and others as needed as well.
The bedroom door is closed.
The bedroom door is closed. We have confirmed that. The suave lumberjack cat boy will not be amongst us today. Yeah. I think we should get to it. I'm even on the right camera too. This is brilliant.
Well done.
Thank you. I'm quite proud of me.
Ooh, I like that Haven Lenny has a designated stream snack.
That's really good.
I want a stream snack.
I'll get one while I'm
I
reading.
don't have any stream snacks.
Go.
I'm gonna have to remember that for next week.
Okay.
Stream snacks.
Stream snacks. Making a note, checking it twice.
Hashtag stream snacks.
The Tunnel by Kerry Hammond. Content warning, claustrophobia, implied child death. Hey guys! To celebrate my new Tumblr reaching almost 900 followers, I figured I'd go ahead and put down a story that I won't share on Reddit to thank all of you. I have a close friend who grew up in the area I did, so we have some similar memories of the woods and going out in them. He used to tell a story when we were kids that I never believed, because, well, he was pretty infamous for making shit up, but I've been reflecting more on it as I've been writing these other ones. When he was about 12, he belonged to a Boy Scout troop, and they went out to a campsite for a weekend retreat, or whatever you call those things. As I recall, he said it was him and about 12 other kids. He and like 3 others decided that after everyone had fallen asleep, they'd all get up and go fuck around in the forest, try and see which one of them would wimp out first. They ended up waking up one other kid on accident, and obviously he wanted to go with them. So they all headed out pretty late at night. He said he didn't know exactly how late because he didn't think to check the time, but he estimated that it was a little after midnight. Only one of them brought a flashlight, so they stayed pretty close together. Now, they got out far enough that they weren't afraid of waking anyone up, and they're horsing around and messing with each other and trying to spook everybody. And my friend said it was actually really fun, until one of the kids pointed ahead and said that he saw something. They followed, and he led them to what looked like an old, big fire pit. The kid was standing over it, looking into the centre of it, and he asked for the flashlight. Everyone gathered around, and my friend said it was the strangest thing. He said it almost looked like one of those old Warner Brothers cartoons, where there's an almost perfect circle made of solid black on the ground. He said he actually bent down to touch it and see if it really was just paper, but his hand went right down into the ground. When they lit up with the flashlight, they could see that it was, in fact, an almost perfect circular tunnel into the earth, with crude dirt steps carved into the sides, spiralling down. Now, the pit itself was about 5 feet wide, and the circle was almost exactly that, so it was plenty large enough for a small boy to go down into it. They did the typical things, yelling into it, dropping a few rocks to see if they could hear it land, but they couldn't see or hear where it ended, so the talk turned to electing a kid to go down. My friend begged out of it, and he got ragged on, but he said it just didn't seem right, and he didn't think any of them should be going down there. But the kid with the flashlight, who was sort of the unofficial leader, gave my friend the flashlight and said he was going to check it out. He climbed down into it and started following the stairs, which spiraled along the sides and down in a steep twist. He said once he got down far enough, he'd call for the flashlight, and my friend would toss it down. Which is stupid, I know, but maybe the kid wanted to prove he wasn't scared. They watched him go down, they kept the light on him the whole time, and then they couldn't see him anymore. Eventually they could barely hear him, and my friend started to ask him whether he was going to come back up, or when he was going to come back up, but they said the last thing they heard him say was something to the effect of, "It's just going and going." And then he vanished, and they couldn't see or hear him. Not knowing what to do, but also not wanting to follow him down, the rest of the group waited by the pit for hours for this kid to come back. It was late, and they were little boys, so at some point all of them fell asleep. When they woke up, it was daylight, and the circle was gone. I mean, gone. The ground was flat, like it had never even been there. They all panicked and dug down as far as they could, but there wasn't even a trace of the tunnel. My friend said it wasn't like a cave-in, it was like there'd never been anything there in the first place. Now, they rushed back to camp, where everyone was just starting to notice their collective absence, and told the counsellor what had happened. He didn't believe the whole bit about the weird tunnel, but he could see a kid was missing. So, he calls the police. The searches started. My friend and the rest of the remaining group led the searchers to the fire pit, and there was a massive excavation, and they never found anything. They searched the area for miles, investigated a lot of sex offenders in town in case it was an abduction, but they never found a single trace of that kid. Radio by Carrie Hammond. I don't sleep. That is almost not an exaggeration. I average around 2 hours a night on a good night, and that's 2 hours of deep sleep, REM sleep, the kind that your body uses to fix itself. It's been getting worse for a while, but it'll go away eventually. It always has before. I just have to ride it out, keep my strings from unraveling until I can get myself glued back together. They say it's better for you to lie in bed the hours that you'd be asleep and just pretend, because it helps get the body's natural circadian rhythm back. So every night I lie in bed for 8 hours, and I spend 6 of them watching the man on the top of the radio tower. There is a window above my bed, and when I'm sleeping in it, I have to sit up to see out of it. I like to be aware of my surroundings, so I installed a mirror on the opposite wall to allow me to see out of it. I have blackout curtains to ensure that my sleep is as genuine as possible, but some nights I like to leave them open. Watch the sky. Down the road from me is a radio tower. It's the largest thing on the horizon, and at the top is a little maintenance balcony. Now, the tower is close enough for me to see this balcony clearly. On this particular night, the blinds were cracked so that I could watch a storm approaching in the mirror, safe in bed. Heat lightning started to strobe across the sky, and it illuminated something moving on top of the tower. I sat up in bed, looked out the window, and on the top of the tower, on the little balcony, I could see the very small shape of a man waving something. He was moving his arms in strange rhythmic jerking patterns facing towards the storm. I'd never seen anyone on the tower before, and I couldn't think of a single reason that this man would have been there at midnight while the storm was coming. I called the police and they sent someone out, but at some point the man left. I don't know how I missed him. He didn't come back the next night or for weeks afterwards. I thought about him a lot, though, and I kept watch every night. Because something bothered me very deeply, and I thought of his strange jerking arms, and I thought of the things he'd been holding, and I wasn't sleeping anyway, so I invested in a pair of binoculars and I kept a vigil for him. Every single night. I didn't see him come up on the tower, but he was there as soon as it got dark. I'd already gotten my 2 hours of sleep, and now I was awake and ready. I grabbed the binoculars and I brought him into focus. He was an older white man in a casual jacket. He reminded me of every single cubicle worker I have ever seen. Nothing about him was remarkable, except the cloth he was waving, which was this just stunningly bright white. He stared vacantly out at the skyline and moved his arms in these odd, sharp movements. His mouth hung open, and even from here I could see he hadn't shaved in some time. He blinked occasionally, but most of the time he just stared, mouth open, looking at nothing. Even though I was watching him the whole time, I didn't see him leave. He went away again for almost 2 years. The insomnia faded, and I slept very soundly without the mirror, which I had thrown out not long after the last sighting. I wasn't afraid of seeing him again. I threw it out because I couldn't stop myself from waiting for him. I could not get the man out of my thoughts. I did research into the company that owned the tower, and I knew with concrete certainty that the man did not belong to anyone in the city. He was not employed by any government agency or department. So, what was he doing on the radio tower? My suspicions about him began to grow. I researched nearby airports. He didn't belong to them, or at least no one who looked like he did that night, but I felt certain that somewhere, someone would know him. I found his family in Topeka. The address on the missing persons report was still current. He had a wife and 4 children and was loving and loved very deeply. He had vanished on the way to his car one morning and hadn't been seen since. The night he came back, I was reading, pretending I wasn't, that I was choosing to stay up, and I saw the orange flag out of the corner of my eye. He was back, illuminated on the radio tower by the light of the moon. His orange flags stood out like beacons, and I grabbed my binoculars, my other hand gripping a pen. I waited until he reached the end of the message, and I started over again. He raised his arms as if to signal 10 on the clock. I wrote down the letter T. He held his arms straight out to the side, and the left crossed over to hip level. I wrote it down. Left at knee level, right raised above the shoulder, 5 till 3. Arms out at the sides, hands at knee and shoulder again. I wrote them all down. When he started over, I read the message. They're coming back again. Late Night by Kerry Hammond. Content warning, heavily implied threat to children. Lately I haven't been sleeping much. There's a lot on my mind, and I've always been prone to insomnia anyway. The last few days it's been bad enough that I'm lucky if I get 2-3 hours tops. Last night was my Friday, and I had planned on staying up, but I hadn't planned on pulling an all-nighter. I'm working on a personal writing project though, and I lost track of time. I took a break around 3 in the morning, got up to stretch and eat and shit, and I passed my living room on the way to the kitchen. Like a lot of people, I leave my TV on all the time in a low volume, because I like the background noise, you know? Silence can be just as toxic as cacophony. I live in a very small town, and the local news still has the traditional sign-off when the program ends for the night. An American flag waves while the anthem plays, and a message bids the viewers a good night. And after that, it's just a test pattern until 6, when the early guys come on. When I passed by, the anthem was just coming to an end, so I made a sandwich, and on the way back to the bedroom, I stopped to change the channel to something else, but the station wasn't playing its usual test pattern, and I sat down to see what was going on. Around here, the Forest Service puts out emergency broadcasts when someone goes missing, or there's an issue in the park. Our town is basically bordered on 3 sides by very dense woodland, so anything that happens in the park affects us almost immediately, and alerts are not uncommon. I wondered if someone had had an issue at one of the campgrounds, and I figured I might as well see what was going on before going back to work. If it was a major issue, they were going to call me in anyway. Might as well beat them to the punch. So I eat my sandwich and I mute the TV so I wouldn't have to listen to the tone, and whoever was running the alert, I realised, wasn't using a canned message, so the standard alert was still flashing. I found that odd. They shouldn't be running it so early. Generally, if a major issue comes up in the small hours, the tornado sirens are turned on and the cops will go door to door. It's a very small town, so that's not an impossible task. The only times in my memory that we've had to do this were when the tornado touched down outside the town limits, and last year, when a wildfire hopped the state border and was coming at us faster than anticipated. But I've never seen an alert run after about 10 at night, so it was strange to see an emergency alert now without hearing the sirens running in tandem. The standard screen flickered for a second, which usually signals the end of the tone and the beginning of the actual message, so I unmuted the TV, and I caught the tail end of the tone before it switched to the interval honk, or whatever that flat tone is called. A message appeared, very briefly, and I didn't have time to see it, and you can't, of course, rewind emergency broadcasts. A second message popped up. Please be advised. Advised was spelt wrong. I laughed. Started to pull my phone out of my pocket for a screenshot. I knew the people in charge of the broadcast system, and they get hell about typos from the higher-ups, but before I could take a picture, the message disappeared and was replaced with a real-time one. Whoever was writing it was typing fast and inaccurately. And this is around when I started to get a little bit uneasy. Please, spelt wrong, do not contact emergency services, both words spelt wrong, or family members, members spelt wrong. We are spelt wrong, aware of the situation. The message disappeared, and there was a brief pause. I sent a text to a buddy of mine who also tends to stay up late and told him to turn on the news. A new message, pre-typed, appeared. Please ensure that all children are present before making a report. False reports are subject to the message cut off. Nothing from my buddy. I started scanning the news on my phone for any breaking stories, but I didn't see anything. The weather was calm, there were no fires. They can move. New message. My phone buzzed and I pulled up the text. My buddy was watching and was just as perplexed as I was, so I called him and we talked while we watched the alert. Call the police. You seeing this? My friend said. Fuck are they doing? Well, who's doing it too? It's not a drill. Doesn't say. Doesn't it say if it's just a test? We were both quiet while we read the new message. Make them run. If they can't go back inside and call 911, don't let kids see themselves. We don't know what happens. There's no way. This is a joke, dude. Someone's going to get fired. I couldn't tell if he was trying to make me laugh or himself. At the tree line, they get stuck and they run in place or they turn into something else. Please don't be afraid. They aren't your children. Your children are asleep. Both of us were very quiet. Please avoid going between levels of your house. Stay where you are. Your children are not outside. They are upstairs in bed. What do we do? My buddy asked. Don't go up your stairs, I guess. Then we both started laughing for some reason. We didn't stop until the next message appeared. Stay where you are. Your children are sleeping. They are asleep. Don't move. Just stay where you are. Please stop calling. Don't look outside. It's not them. Read the prompts and follow. We don't know what they are. Stop calling. Weapons are ineffective. They can't leave the trees. Stay where you are. They are not your children. Suddenly the broadcast ended and the test pattern came up. My buddy and I waited for a bit and then hung up. I turned the TV to another channel and I got up to look out the window. My property includes several acres of heavily wooded land, and I looked out in the backyard where the tree line is clearest. And at the edge of the trees, I saw what I think was a small boy. He was running in place in a very slow, almost robotic way. I couldn't make out any details, but he seemed familiar. He continued to run in place, his legs moving in big, exaggerated arcs, his arms pumping. I looked down for a second to unlock the door, and when I looked up, he was gone. Like he'd never been there. I closed the door and locked it and moved to the bedroom. I made sure all the blinds were closed, and I did not get much more work done. I didn't work for the next 2 days, but this morning I texted my buddy to see what he's heard. He says only a few other people saw the broadcast, and the guys in charge are in deep water. As to whether or not the situation, whatever it was real, it seems no one is talking. But he says our park had an emergency meeting this morning. We've all been advised to keep an eye out for any unusual activity. They haven't specified what that activity might be. I doubt we'll ever learn anything, one way or another. But I think I'll keep my blinds closed at night, for now. Just glancing at the chat before we go on to the next one. Yes, that story is illegitimate. Well, I'm moving.
Everyone take a breath.
This next one is heavy. Be warned.
Is this the claustrophobia one as well?
This is the body horror and implied child death.
Okay.
Anniversary by Kerry Hammond. Content warning, body horror and implied child death. We know their names and their birthdays. We know who was missing teeth, who was afraid of the dark, who had bruises. We know who had a hair lip scar, who had a brother that died while being born. We know what they wanted to be when they grew up. We can fill books with what we know, but what we don't know are the only things that matter to us. We have retraced our steps and gone over every piece that we have, but in the end, it doesn't add up to anything, so all we can do is pull over it and try again and again to make it all go somewhere, lead to something, because nothing else is important. Not anymore. All that matters is what we don't have. Here's what we know. On June 21st, 1995, the local Cub Scout troop met at the south entrance of the national park, which is located approximately 20 miles from town. They were led by two scoutmasters, Huxley and Anders. There were 18 boys in attendance, ranging from ages 7 to 10. For many of them, it was their first real camping trip. This is a small town, and most, if not all of them, knew each other, at least by name. Everyone had been given permission by their parents to go. Their uniforms would have been freshly cleaned, their packs new and still stiff on their shoulders. We can only imagine the cacophony of all those young boys running around in the picnic area. We bring this up because they were real, and people forget that. They were real. They were alive, and you could touch them. They ran around, and they had nightmares, and they enjoyed ice creams. They were real children with real lives. The Scoutmasters got everyone together and took attendance. One witness remembers seeing them before they left on their own hike. They were by the tables, big group of them. Honestly, I was glad when they went the other way. Cute, but, didn't really want them on my back. Guess I don't feel like that now, though, but they seemed like they knew what they were doing. The group entered the forest around 8 in the morning, as best as we can figure. There aren't any cameras out there, of course, but based on their schedule, we feel confident that's an accurate figure. They took a trail that leads into the mountains about 40 miles before looping back around and ending about 5 miles from the entrance. The group intended to go about 5 miles, where they would camp at the base of the mountains at an established site. Along the way, they passed a group of tourists. They reported nothing unusual. The boys were in good spirits, following along and chattering noisily. One of them, a boy we later determined to be an 8-year-old named Peter Connolly, waved hello as he passed. The tourists waved back. As the group made their way up the trail, they stopped frequently to identify the plants and trees. During one of these stops, the boys began a pine cone war, which a passing hiker became involved in. The game ended when a younger boy, we aren't sure which, suddenly began to cry, and a ceasefire was called. The hiker said the boy didn't appear to be injured, rather he seemed to be frightened of something up in the trees, something he kept pointing at. The hiker didn't see anything, and he moved on. The group stayed for a little longer before moving on. Further up the trail, a candy bar wrapper was discovered impaled on a branch. We aren't sure who put it there, but one of the boys' mothers told us that it was her son's favourite brand. He really likes them. I keep them in a drawer so he can have one after school. You can't find them here. You have to go to Denali's up in Bridgeport. They have them. They know he likes them. She began to cry, so we ended the interview. We kept the wrapper initially as evidence, but it has since been given back to her. When we interviewed her, it was being kept on the fridge, with the boy's picture on it. She did not allow us to photograph it for the record. The boys reached the campsite around 1. One other family was present, but did not intend to stay the night. They had been there for a few days and were packing up as the scouts were settling in. The family, a father and his 2 daughters, made small talk with the boys and the scoutmasters. Oh, it was fun. They were running around. I had the girls help set up the tents, he looked at back. Before the interview, he had sent his 2 young daughters outside. I mean, it was fine. They were fine. We've been up there a million times. They got set up and I was talking with Howard Huxton. We corrected him. Huxley. Yeah, Huxley. We were talking and he said something about, did I know any good swimming places? But you know that time of year, it's so cold. Told him that. And he said that's fine, and then we just sort of talked for a little longer. And then me and the girls headed out. Nothing bad or anything. They just wanted to go swimming. Have some fun. From this point, we don't have an official record of what the group did. We know, based on what was left behind, that the tents were put up and a fire started. Sticks were found with blackened tips, so at least a few of the boys roasted things in the fire. Logs were set up, and there were scuff marks in the dirt where the boys rested their feet. Someone tossed their cap up in a tree, and it was still there when the search party arrived. They probably intended to retrieve it on the way out. The boys sat around the fire and told stories. They roasted things, and the scoutmasters smoked cigarettes and drank at least 4 beers. The cans were found outside the camp. Again, we believe they intended to retrieve them later. A trail through the bush led us to believe that at least some of the boys went to a clearing and looked at the stars. They are remarkably clear out there. The boys went to bed. The scoutmasters stayed up for a while longer to make sure everyone was asleep. At some point, they went to bed too, and the camp became quiet. There is again no official account of what happened next. All we know for sure is that at some point the camp was packed and the group moved on. Nothing, save for the articles mentioned, were left behind. The group moved west, further up the trail, and it is believed that they were headed for the swimming area. All of the boys' mothers confirmed that their children took swimming equipment. All of them knew how to swim. Whether they actually went, of course, we aren't sure. But we can imagine the group winding up the trail, the boys in a line talking to each other, singing songs. The boys would be looking forward to swimming, to spending another night out in the woods. Their spirits would have been high. They would have eaten a good breakfast of eggs and hot dogs, which makes it all the more heartbreaking that at some point along the trail on June 22nd, all 20 people in the group disappeared. The group was due back that afternoon. Parents began arriving around 3, and when the group still hadn't shown up by 5, a few of them decided to hike a ways up the trail to see what had delayed them. After hiking almost 3 miles and seeing no sign of them, they realized something was wrong, and they hurried back to the entrance. The call came in at approximately 6. By 7, the park was swarming with police and search and rescue. Those of us in town were quick to learn about it. Word travels fast, and the hysteria that came along with it was almost intoxicating. Within minutes, it seems the town was full of police, park rangers from neighbouring counties, search teams, German shepherds on leashes being led to the entrance, their noses to the ground. The search itself was massive and encompassed tens of miles of the park, much further than anyone was realistically expected to have travelled. Dogs were taken out, given multiple scents to work with in all directions. There was certainly no lack of effort that could explain why nothing and no one has ever been found. In an almost grotesque move, all 18 sets of parents were brought before the cameras in a huge, miserable group. They were given turns to give their children messages, to plead with their imagined captors, to offer rewards, to offer forgiveness. For weeks, the population in town doubled. Many families, including ours, offered room and board to the volunteers flooding in at an incredible rate. Eventually, it made national news. Every tree in town wore a yellow ribbon. And as time went on and the search turned up nothing, people began to leave. They went back home to their real lives, and as incredible as it seems, the boys were largely forgotten. A quiet rumour began to spread that the group had drowned in the lake, although no one had been found in it. For a long time, people talked about the pit at the bottom of that lake, which went deep into the earth and contained more than those 20 bodies. The rumour persisted, was used to justify the removal of the yellow ribbons, the signs on telephone poles screaming, "Bring our babies home," the whole bit. On August 15th, the chief of police gave a televised speech insisting that the case was still open and being investigated. But despite the severity of the crime, the nation moved on. Donations dried up, searches couldn't be afforded, the lake was closed. The yellow ribbons vanished. On June 21st, 1996, local emergency services received a call from a terrified woman who claimed there was something in her backyard. No transcript exists of any of the calls made that evening, but through many interviews we have been able to piece most of them together. The first call from the terrified woman was placed at approximately 8 in the evening. According to the officer who took it, the woman claimed that someone had defaced one of the trees in her backyard. She could not explain how they had done it, or who it might have been, but as she described it, one of the trees in her yard now had a face. The face, she said, was screaming and begging her to come outside and help it. She wanted the awful thing removed immediately. An officer was dispatched, went to the scene, found nothing. The woman could not explain where the face had gone. 2 hours later, calls began to pour in from all over town. As we later discovered, the calls were placed from homes that all bordered or were located in the woods. An elderly man called to complain about 2 boys who were playing some sort of game at the edge of his property. The boys, he explained, had crammed themselves into one shirt and were playing at being conjoined in some awful fashion. Their screaming woke his wife, who was gravely ill, and he wanted to press charges. 2 blocks down, a young single mother reported seeing a very young boy running at the edge of the trees, but that he never seemed to move. He simply ran in place, his arms pumping, his face wet with tears. She looked him in the eye, and as if by magic, he disappeared. 1 mile away, on a property located within the forest, a hunter reported seeing a boy walking upside down through the air, almost 20 feet off the ground, carrying his own spine in his arms like a baby. All across town, strange noises were heard. Muffled conversations, screaming, crying. A name was heard which was later connected to one of the missing boys. A woman reported a strange, repetitive sound that she likened to the sound a chainsaw makes when it strikes rock. It woke her 2 children and frightened them badly enough that she bundled them up in her car and drove to her mother's house a county away. And still, the calls poured in. Well into the small hours of the night, people reported seeing horrible things. One man, a notorious drunk, called in stone sober to report having seen the head of a young boy emerging from the ground, the mouth a distorted, elongated scream of terror. As the head rose from the ground, the jaw did not end, but stretched like taffy until the whole affair was more than double his height. He shut all the blinds tightly and drank himself into a coma. He has since died, and we cannot confirm his story. All over town, on the anniversary of the disappearance of those 20 souls, the strange apparitions were seen, heard, in some cases, felt. A teenage girl walked in the woods with her boyfriend on a late-night date. They stumbled over something. Upon closer inspection, she determined that what she had tripped over was not in fact a bush, but the top of someone's head. When it moved under her fingers, she and the young man fled into the night, terrified beyond reason. As the sun began to rise, the calls dwindled and then they stopped. Despite the entire town having heard and seen the strange apparitions, the incident was not discussed in any media or even between the people themselves. However, an exodus of the town soon followed. Many of the 18 families moved away, never to be seen again. They left quickly and with no fuss. They simply packed their things, took their remaining children, and fled in the night, leaving behind empty houses and rooms painted blue or yellow or green. We did not pursue them. The town, desperate to move on, willfully forgot those yellow figures, those painted rooms. When the houses still stand, they remain empty. Squatters do not live there. The rooms are bare. The houses stand like physical memories. There is constant talk of demolition, but nothing ever comes of it. The 20 people lost on June 21st, 1995 have never been found. Last one, folks, I promise, and it's not as bad as that. Yeah, that's a lot.
That one was a lot.
Molten by Kerry Hammond. Content warning, body horror. You see my eyes? Okay. A very good friend of mine has a young daughter that she's raising on her own. They live about a mile from me, so I see them a fair amount. I'm not really fond of kids, which I think I've mentioned before, but this one's pretty alright. She's about 5, and she's really taken a shine to me for some reason, so she stays over sometimes. Gives her mom a bit of a break to do other things. A few months ago, she came over to spend a few days with me. Mom was going out of town on a little mini vacation, and I offered to take Ash. She shows up with his big backpack and sleeping bag in a little indoor tent. She said she wanted to camp in the living room. Now, her mom is also a ranger, so Ash knows a lot about the outdoors. She was going through a camping obsession, and she knew I'd indulge her. We spent most of the afternoon out on the trails behind the house, her pointing at everything and talking at me non-stop, and me holding the field guide she brought, just in case. We had dinner, we watched a documentary, I set up the tent for her in the middle of the room. She conked out relatively early, so I went into the bedroom to work for a while. Around 2, I heard the tent zipper, and I figured she was going to the bathroom, but she took a left and stood in the doorway. I asked her what was up, and she shuffled over to climb on my lap, which kind of startled me. Ash isn't an especially physical kid. She doesn't like hugs or kisses, and she'd never gotten on my lap before. I waited for her to tell me what was going on, and her face was puffy, and there was a feather stuck in her hair. "I can't sleep," she mumbled. "Why?" I said. She looked over at the door and sighed, leaned her head against me. That shiny man. Shiny man, I repeated. He's noisy, and he's bright. The light's in my eyes. He's too noisy. I thought about that while she fell asleep. I brought her back to the living room and maneuvered her back in the tent without waking her up. Didn't see anything strange, so I went to bed. Figured she'd had a weird dream. About a month later, she came to spend the night again, but she didn't bring her tent, so I put her in the bedroom like usual. We'd had a long day, and as soon as she was asleep, I got set up on the couch and passed out, and at some point, she shook me awake. I woke up and turned over. I need a blanket, please, she said. Cold? I sat up. He wants one. I stood up and turned on the light. Who does? That shiny man. He's cold. I took her hand and we went back into the bedroom. I didn't see anything, but she kept talking about a blanket, so I got one from the closet. I wasn't really listening until she went to the blanket. She grabbed the blanket and she ran to the window. She held it up and put her nose right on the glass. Here, she said. Now he'll stop crying. I could feel this strange kind of unease building. This was not right. I went to the window and nudged her aside so I could look out. Where is he? I asked. I didn't see anything. Oh, he went back, but he'll come down again, Ash said. I only half heard her. Is he a friend? She shook her head hard enough to make her hair fly. No. Is he Mom's? Ash's father had been stalking her mother for years, and he's tried to manipulate Ash before, promising her toys if she says bad things about her mom, that sort of thing. I was starting to wonder if he was the man, trying to get her to open the window so he could snatch her. I pulled the blinds shut and got down so I could talk to her seriously, eye to eye. Is it her friend? I asked again, but she shook her head. No. Does he want you to go outside? I was listening for any kind of noise, watching for the motion-activated lights to go off. He's cold, she said. Is he old? Or is he like me? I tried. She shook her head. I don't know. His face is all melty. Melty. It got melted one side. Now it's melty and shiny. He's cold. He won't let me sleep, so we have to give him that blanket, okay? I don't understand. What's shiny? I said. She took off toward the kitchen, and I followed. She was going through one of the drawers and talking about how he was a sad man, and she felt bad that he was cold. I heard a metallic wobbling, and she stood up with a piece of tinfoil. She pulled one side of her face down with her hand, turning her lower eyelid out and yanking her mouth into an unsettling grimace. Then she pressed the tinfoil against her skin. Like that, she explained, but it's watery, and sometimes he spits it out. She stood there with half her face pressed to the tinfoil, and I had no idea what to say except to ask the obvious. Where does he come from? She dropped the foil and went to the bedroom. She pressed her nose against the window again. He comes down. Down from there. She pointed to the tree line. And he was window. And he was, I'm cold, but he's all steaming and shiny. We both looked out in the window, but the yard was empty. She yawned hugely and got back in the bed and closed her eyes. The blanket's going to get all shiny too. Within seconds, she was asleep again. I watched and listened for a while, but nothing came to the window. She went home the next morning, and I didn't tell her mom about anything. I needed time to piece things together. That was a mistake, because once they were connected, I could not take them apart. The man who came to her window was covered in molten metal. He came from the trees and walked to the window where he stood and told her that he was cold. So cold. Molten metal, I've learned, destroys the nerves, incinerates them on contact. What's left is shock, the sensation of intense, unbearable cold, and a small eternity before the water in your body explodes outwards and the flesh evaporates in a cloud of vapor. Ash still comes over. The shiny man still visits. I'm a heavy sleeper, but lately I've taken to wearing earplugs at night when I'm alone. we are officially out of the woods.
How long have you been waiting to use that?
It literally came to me just now.
Really?
Literally just now, yes. How's everyone doing?
You just ended the stream talking about a man evaporating and a pun.
Yes, hi.
That's so you. So very you.
Is everyone alright? I know those last two are quite hefty. Oh, Octopus, I'm really sorry. Check the VOD, because the reveal on this one's actually really good.
I like how you want to talk a little bit about the order of the stories?
Yeah, I actually moved the order around on these a little bit for two reasons. The Radio Man actually comes last. And I talk about this in the Twitter thread. I found these linked on the TV Tropes page for Search and Rescue, and the order that they're presented in, like I say, Radio actually comes last. I moved them around. I moved them around for a couple of reasons. The personal one is I'm always very cognizant of the effect this stuff could potentially have on me, and I've suffered from insomnia in the past, so I didn't want a story about insomniac to be the last thing I read tonight. The most interesting one, though, is the fact that when you move these around like this, they become very, very, very different. By placing Radio before Anniversary, it almost serves as a lead-in for it. And it's the really interesting thing about these 4 or 5 little pieces, that they interrelate with one another. The passing reference to the swimming hole with the pit in it in Anniversary, which could be in the first story. The recurrent thing of this town literally surrounded by the woods, and things just coming out of them, and the town just having to deal. All of this stuff just hangs together in a really fun and really interesting way.
No, I like the order that you put them in, because you're right, it does tie them all together. I should come over.
Thank you. Do you want to put the top light on? Or are we good with... No.
We're enjoying the shiny
Shiny.
Lots and lots of lights.
So, that was Search and Rescue. And as Becky has just said, basically this little town is fucked. Yes, they are screwed.
I don't think there's going to be a little town for terribly much longer. I certainly wouldn't. It's cursed.
So is your town built on a hellmouth? No, we're not that lucky.
No.
But of course, horror stories such as this are not the only thing we do.
Yeah, I think it might be time to lighten the mood.
And now, shenanigans.
Da-da-da-da.
Shenanigans.
Really?
Shenanigans.
You're just amusing yourself this evening. It's kind of...
Yes. Yes, I am. I regret nothing.
Alright, are you going to tell people what shenanigans are?
Shenanigans, for those of you who have not visited us before, are pieces designed to lighten the mood, as is often required. Most of the time it's Magnus Archives related stuff. We've done all kinds of...
I don't think this evening is any exception.
This evening is no different. We have found a...
Shenanigans of the shenanigans.
Oh, we are amongst our people.
Oh God, that's going to go on the closing quote this week. I just know it.
Now Alex approved. Thanks again, Becky.
Exactly. I, in fact, moved something from the bookcase so that sticker would show up better, because I like it so much.
Brain sorbet, exactly.
Yes.
These are things designed to get you, and let's be real, me, out the other side of this without horrible melting nightmare men in our minds.
Of course Alex is going to regret this approval, Silver. That's why we got it in writing in public, because then it can't be retracted.
Yes.
I mean, other people will start to adopt it. It's not just us. It is, multi-purpose approval to go forth and create joy.
Yeah,
Let's say
exactly. So, let's have some shenanigans, shall we?
We have a bunch of little bits tonight, and let me be prepared to send links. Which means I need to put my tea down. All right. Ready for shenanigans?
I am ready for shenanigans. This comes from your Tumblr.
No, it was... Well, I didn't write it, but...
Oh, I know. This comes from your Tumblr via Shiny Opals, and it was written by Barely There. Being a TMA fan this week is so hard. I'm glaring every post, every single post with at least mild suspicion. This new meme is everywhere. Audio posts, images, text posts, videos. Nothing is safe from, "Hello, John. Apologies for the deception, but I wanted to make sure you started reading. So I thought it best not to introduce myself." Yeah, I see that the no. In the that's why that's why we're doing this.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
This is from the magnificent The Shitpost Calligrapher. When someone leaves your life, these exits are not made equal. Some are beautiful and poetic and satisfying. Others are, "Hello, John. Apologies for the deception, but I wanted to make sure you started reading, so I thought it best not to introduce myself."
It's hilarious. So the timing on this was you were talking about it, and it was like, "Oh yeah, Shitpost Calligrapher says, oh yeah, I did one of those last week."
Oh no, it's me.
Oh no, it's me. It's nothing sacred.
No.
No.
We also have a request from the Discord from Kaz, I believe.
I'm hoping this link is accurate. Hang on just a second. I'm going to double check it really quick. You've got a screenshot to read off of.
Yes, I do. This was originally posted by Blottin Mackwood earlier in this month. Another hour in the ball pit. I'll do another couple of those. Another hour in the ball pit. Another hour in the ball pit.
I'm not sure if that Discord channel link is going to work, but there was someone in the Discord chat who wanted Alistair to give us the it wasn't Fire Festival. It was.
It was DashCon.
DashCon, the free hour in the ball pit.
Yes.
Do it a little more like Peter Voicey.
Okay, so like full on Stephen Fry Plummy. Yes.
Yes.
Me.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Another hour in the ball pit. And to close shenanigans this week, yeah. Should we do it? Let's do it. Let's do it. This is from Silvercolor, courtesy of AO3. Breaking news. Summary. The Guardian publishes a certain article, and the paper mysteriously finds its way to Peter. Breaking news. The loneliest building in London. How a privately owned tower block isolated its inhabitants. A tower block in London's Aldgate East is being hailed as the loneliest building in all of London by both inhabitants and community programs alike. The building's design has been made to the owner's specifications, which experts say appear to be intended to isolate every inhabitant from both their neighbours and the outside world. The information has come to light due to the insight of one elderly woman who wishes to remain anonymous, who became concerned as the inhabitants appeared more and more lonely every day. Confusingly, the lower floors of the Aldgate Tower block have been left vacant, even to the point that rooms remained unfurnished and unfinished up to the 4th floor of the building. Higher floors have confusing plans filled with corridors that are not quite maze-like, but seem empty and abandoned, even when inhabited. Which apartments were inhabited was unclear until a close examination of the floor plans revealed that not all doors lead to apartments. Approximately every other door on each corridor does not lead to any rooms, but rather to an empty stretch of space. Whether these empty rooms ever had a storage purpose is unclear, as none appear to be in use, and no one but the building's concierge, who keeps frustratingly irregular hours, had keys to them. In contrast to this vast waste of housing space, the apartments for rent were oddly small. Appearing spacious at first, most rooms were of impractical sizes, and several of the architects involved have stated that this was the exact thing they had advised not to include in the building plan. One inhabitant who showed us her impractical flat stated, "I've never seen anyone on my floor at all, despite having lived here for several months. The only times I met people were in the lobby and perhaps once in the elevator." The aforementioned elevators are beyond small, and though up to current building code, they barely fit more than 2 people at a time. Another inhabitant informed us that he was only still here because the rent is decent, even though the place is damned lonely. The cost of rent for each apartment is indeed astonishingly cheap compared to the current London median rent. Knowing this, the fact that half the building should have remained empty is even more astounding. Was all this wasted space simply mismanagement of the design and renting out of the building? All architects and designers involved in the process were contracted separately, and all of those we have been able to reach stated the same thing, that they were only asked to design one specific part or a few details about the building, under a variety of pretenses. A small part of the contracted designers a small group of the contracted designers were asked about what not to do when building a tower block like this, advice which was, in all cases, ignored. Some were even unaware which building their design was for until contacted by this newspaper. The owner of the Aldgate Tower block could not be reached for comments or explanations on the design of the building or the empty parts of the tower block. Indeed, who the owner is remains unclear, as various inhabitants referred to him as Luke, Pete, and Patrick, and even the only discernible employee, the concierge. I don't recall his name, he's rather forgettable. Several community programs have begun reaching out to the inhabitants to involve them in the life of the neighbourhood, with what seems like great success, despite the short time they have been at work for the inhabitants of the Aldgate East building. Though the programs are hopeful that no lasting problems will remain, one spokesperson has said this horror should never have been allowed to happen, especially in today's highly interconnected society. That these people were forgotten for so long is an outrage, and we fully support the class action lawsuit, which we know some of the inhabitants are considering.
You should do that in Elias' voice, because it's probably him.
Actually, yes, I will do. Though the programs are hopeful that no lasting problems will remain, one spokesperson has said that this horror should never have been allowed to happen, especially in today's highly interconnected society. That these people were forgotten for so long is an outrage, and we fully support the class action lawsuit, which some of the inhabitants are considering. How the newspaper had found its way to Peter Lucas's desk, he could not say. But there it was. Suspiciously, it was laid out neatly to display its loud headline to whoever entered the office, not towards the chair behind the desk. Arranged so that it would be visible as soon as one entered the office. Peter's office, which no one but Peter ever entered. He was halfway through the blasted article when the phone on his desk started ringing. It didn't stop ringing for the rest of the day. Peter never picked up the calls. Perhaps it was time to return to the tundra.
Read the little note afterwards.
Notes. Alistair made me do it. No, actually, that's not true. I volunteered. And you did such a great job, Silver. I love that. So, that is...
There's also a request for Peter to demand to speak to the manager like Karen.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll put on my best aggrieved posh. No, I'm sorry. That's simply not good enough. I demand to speak to the manager. Cool. Thank you, folks. This has, as ever, been big fun. Do we have a poll?
I'm about to start a poll.
Yes!
So why don't you set it up and tell us what we're going to do?
Okay, so...
I'm hoping this is going to work. I've never done one before.
Right. So, we have several ideas for what we're going to do next. One of them is another piece of classic creepypasta called Ted the Caver. Another one is a couple of weeks of Manx fairy tales, much lighter in tone, although there are exploding shoes, or possibly a head in one. My island's a little odd. And I completely forgot what our third option was. It was the...
Victorian vampire novella.
Victorian vampire novella. So, basically take a look, see which one grabs your fancy, and whichever one gets the most votes will do. Also, scrolling back up to the top of my notes for a moment, the other thing which we need to talk about really briefly is the stream schedule for the next couple of weeks. This coming Sunday, we're going to start streaming Beyond Blue, which is this really fun, interesting, near-future oceanography game, which is kind of crosses over with the documentary series Blue Planet 2, but also has a discoverable narrative within itself. It's the usual Sunday kind of thing, very chill, very relaxing, and hopefully not suddenly a hard left turn into monster boss fights, great as Concrete Genie was. Then on Wednesday, the 22nd of July, whichever story you pick in the poll that's probably working now.
It is working!
Hey!
There's even a little timer running for it and everything. This is cool.
We will begin. And then things get a little funky.
Yeah.
Sunday, we're going to be streaming twice. 10 a.m. in the morning, usual game stream. And then at 8 o'clock, Sunday night,
the 26th of July,
we will be making... I will be making the Rusty Quill stream official debut.
And that will be another bedtime story. It
Yes.
is probably your all-time favorite horror story.
It is my all-time favorite horror story. It is a story which, like all the best types of horror, I read entirely too young, which did the best kind of damage. And I'm really looking forward to talking about it.
And we have an extra special lengthy shenanigan.
Oh, there's a shenana onslaught for that week.
Shenana onslaught.
So yes, that is going to be Sunday the 26th when we'll be streaming twice in one day. Then things get interesting.
Because the following week is Worldcon. And for folks who don't know, that is the science fiction community's annual large conference. It is being hosted by New Zealand, but since none of us are allowed to be in New Zealand, it is a virtual event, but it is still on New Zealand's time. And New Zealand is 11 hours ahead of British summertime. So we are going to have very strange sleeping schedules. More importantly, Wednesday the 29th, our normal 10 o'clock stream, Alistair actually has a Worldcon reading at 10:30 UK time. So we got to figure out whether we're going to do this a little earlier and a little shorter, or if we can find some way to combine the two. We don't know yet.
Yeah.
And then Sunday morning, August 2nd, when we normally would be doing our nice chill video game, we'll probably still be awake from the Hugo ceremony. I gotta check the time on that. So we'll post up a more accurate schedule for that week's worth of streaming, but it's a little subject to flux right now.
Please write the personal chef of Elias and Peter statement. I will happily read that.
We have a winner!
Which is?
With 50% of the vote, it is Manx Fairy Tales, followed very closely by the Victorian vampire novella with 43% of the vote.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So, light emotional duty next week, folks. What?
Gaelic Irish fairy tales is light emotional duty?
Children carrying their spine like a baby.
Fair point.
Yeah.
I'll allow it.
Yeah, okay. Cool. Manx Fairy Tales. I apologize in advance for my accent. That's a lie. That's a terrible lie.
Oh, are you going to put on the accent?
I'm trying to figure out whether it can come back or not. We'll see.
Oh, I can make that happen. Quick, we'll get your sister to send you some dirt from home. That'll be enough.
Yes. Yeah, that's great. Brilliant. Excellent choice, chat. Good work.
All right.
Good, because Ted the Caver makes my butthole disappear into my abdomen. Mine too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's a good one, but I think perhaps the chat would appreciate a little bit of a change up. Awesome. All right. So,
fantastic.
Shall we wrap it up?
Oh, you were doing the mermaid. Brilliant. Yes, let's. Superb. Right. Thank you all so much. Friends of old long-standing Pseudopod people, Magnus Archives, friends all. Thank you. This has been a blast.
Ted Cruz, the Zodiac Caver. Oh, God.
I could make that work, but not this week.
No. We have too much to do.
Right. Thank you so much, folks. We will see you on Sunday.
Tell folks where to find you.
Yes. You can find me on Twitter at Alistair Stewart. You can find me on the web at alistairstewart.com, and you can also sign up for my newsletter, The Full Lid, which drops every Friday at 5 p.m. and is full of pop culture goodness at my website. And you can also read sample issues from it and all that kind of good stuff.
And I think your Hugo voting packet is mostly available
Yes.
online as well.
My Hugo voting packet is extremely available online, so if any of you have Worldcon memberships...
Or are Hugo voters, Alistair is a Best Fan Writer finalist, which he's being too, polite to mention. And voting for the Hugos is open now and closes on the 23rd of July, I think.
Winning smile, delighted look. Thank you. Yes, if you are Hugo voters, please consider voting for me for Best Fan Writer, because that would be great. All right, have an excellent one, folks. Thank you to all of you from both of us.
We will see you on Sunday.
And we'll see you on Sunday.